Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinells, and if I sound a little bit different tonight, that's because once again I'm slightly under the weather. I got a good excuse this time though. It's the week after opening week of a show, which as any theater person can tell you is pure madness. That's what you call Tech Week. That's where you have rehearsal each and every night, and it goes as late as it needs to go. And then, of course, you have your opening weekend performances, and it was a crazy time. The show Avenue Q, of course, is now currently running in Concord, Massachusetts at the Umbrella Center for the Arts in their temporary home while they rebuild the theater. And yeah, Tech Week is just a crazy time. Lots of stuff going on. Not only the show, of course, but the show went wonderful. Opening night, wonderful. Saturday night, wonderful. But in between those two shows, Saturday morning, I took a little road trip down to New Jersey so that I could attend the Chiller Theater convention like I have done for so many years. I think 2003 was the first time I ever went to meet Rowdy Roddy Piper. And I've told that story before, where he knocked me out. Now, I certainly should not have done this, but I did not realize at the time that I was very sick. Because my thermometer, apparently, was broken. It was not registering that I had a fever. I still don't know for sure whether or not I did have a fever, but I could definitely tell that I wasn't feeling right starting on Friday morning and then going into Saturday just not quite up to par. But I never had, the other signs of sickness, vomiting, diarrhea, that kind of thing. All I had were some chills and hot flashes and, just not feeling right. So apparently I was sick and I'm still getting over it. Now it just feels more like a regular cold, but that's why my voice is a little bit shot. All that said, we are doing an episode this week. We are going to be talking about some Massachusetts local legends. I asked recently on Instagram if people would be interested if instead of just doing one story per episode sometimes, I did a little collection of stories. I've done that before, but I just wanted to make sure that it was okay with everybody and that it'd be something that you guys would be interested in. I think it's good to do these kind of local legends because otherwise, we get to talking about some of the famous cases from around the world, but mostly the United States. And a lot of these paranormal shows, you kind of start talking about the same things eventually. And it's good to have your own spin on everything, but it's nice to hear some stories that you might not hear in other places. So that's why I like to focus on these little local legends once in a while. So tonight we're going to be taking a close look at two, and then we're going to move on from there on future episodes. So we'll have lots of Massachusetts mythology volumes to go over. Tonight we're going to be specifically talking about the Westford Knight and Dudley Road of Billerica, a scary, scary road. I even did a field trip to that one. You're going to hear all about that in a little bit. But first, let me finish telling you about Chiller Theater. Now, I actually had a lot of things that I wanted to say about Chiller Theater, but I think because I'm not feeling well and because I have to get ready to go perform in Avenue Q, I'm not going to do my full Chiller report. I'm not going to talk shit about Donnie Most and Anson Williams like I plan to do, but I will. Just remind me someday. I'm not going to talk even more shit about Linda Blair, although I will. Again, remind me someday. But I do want to mention that while I was at Chiller Theater, I got to meet Frank Romano. Now, Frank Romano is a man whose name you might not recognize, and if you saw a picture of him, you might not recognize him. But if you saw his artwork, and if you were born sometime between the 60s and the 90s, you almost certainly would recognize his work because he was the art director for the Ben Cooper Halloween costume company. Ben Cooper is the one that I did a whole episode about it. Hopefully you heard it, but just in case you didn't, it came in a box. You had the kind of cheap plastic mask with the white elastic band to hold it on, and then you had a smock which showed you what you were supposed to be, because sometimes the mask didn't always look so good. Sometimes they were great, sometimes not so much. And then you had the smock with the picture of, say, Batman or the Wolfman or something like that. And Frank Romano did a lot of the artwork for those, and he was the art director for the company. So it was so cool to go there. He had a ton of artwork that you could choose from. You could buy a print for like $25, or you could buy an original on canvas and everything for $500. Now, I ain't that rich, so I just had to go with a print. But the canvas pieces were pretty cool. But Frank is 95 years old, and he is a true living legend of Halloween at this point now. So it was a real treat to get to meet him, take a picture with him. Of course, I posted it on Instagram, so you've already seen it. If you follow me on Instagram, that's at SpookyAssShit. And it was just a very pleasant exchange with him. He's a very pleasant guy. So, speaking of Instagram, let me do the plugs while I'm thinking about that. If you want to find us online, you can check us out at spookyasshit.com or spookyas.com. They both take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to each and every episode, including the ones no longer available on iTunes and perhaps other streaming services. You can also find links to all of our social media. We are at SpookyAssShit on both Twitter and Instagram. And you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. Don't forget, while you're there, if you want to share your private twisted little thoughts without the weight of public judgment, you can join the Spookaroos. That's the Spookaroos. All right, with that out of the way, let's jump into it tonight's episode, and we begin our journey into the local myths of Massachusetts in Westford, Massachusetts, home of the Westford Knight. And when I say knight, I mean a knight as in shining armor, not that time of day when you go out and party if you're young, or if you go to bed if you're older and wiser. When you think of knights, you probably think of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. Maybe you think of real knights fighting in the service of their lords across Europe. Maybe you picture the Knights Templar, with their mysterious quest throughout the Middle East. You probably don't imagine them stopping for some clam chowder in the Bay State. But some believe they may have done just that. And there's proof. Well, that they were here, not the clam chowder part. Some say, about 150 years before Columbus, a Scottish earl by the name of Henry Sinclair arrived in Massachusetts. The theory goes that Sinclair had been a member of the Knights Templar. The Templars were originally formed as a way to protect religious pilgrims traveling to Christian Holy Lands in the Middle East. But in the early 14th century, they had been accused of some shady shit. And we'll get into that on another episode. Anyway, it was bad enough that a succession of popes and several monarchs outlawed the order entirely. So, according to this theory, when the Templars were outlawed in Scotland, Earl Sinclair, hey, Earl Sinclair, dinosaurs, get it? If you do get that reference, congratulations, you're middle-aged. Anyway, rather than risk persecution, Sinclair gathered up a posse of the remaining Templars and loaded up some ships to head west to the then unknown New World. Nobody knows what happened next, but there is perhaps one or two tantalizing clues left in Westford, Massachusetts, and both of them are written in stone. The first is said to be the highly decorated carving of a knight in mail armor, holding a shield and a broken sword symbolizing death. Some say that this is a monument stone to Sir James Gunn, not the director, of course, but the alleged Scottish knight and member of the Templars who traveled with Sinclair's crew. Supporters say the knight's shield and tunic contain images associated with Clan Gunn, and that the sword he bears precisely matches the kind of swords that the Scottish Templars would have used. And you can visit the Westford Knight yourself, if you're so inclined. It's literally on the side of the road, near the center of town, under a protective sheet of plexiglass. The plexiglass, by the way, makes it very difficult to photograph. There is also a rather impressive statue of a bronze knight laid out right next to it to give you an idea of what you are supposedly looking at when you look at the Westford Knight stone. There is signage all around the site that presents the Sinclair story not as an amusing hypothesis, but as an absolute fact. There are some problems with the story, however, and in my opinion, the biggest one is this. I have personally looked into the stone long and hard. I took pictures at various angles, and I've studied them blown up. And I can't make out a goddamn thing. Actual accredited archaeologists who have studied the Westford Knight tend to agree with me. When David K. Schaefer, Cultural Assistant of Archaeology at the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard University, investigated the rock, he concluded that the T-shaped incision, which believers call the sword, was definitely carved into the stone by a human being, but that the so-called knight himself and all the other images around were nothing more than some random scratches in the rock caused by Mother Nature as she moved glaciers around. There is further reason for doubt. It was not associated with knights in any way until the 1950s. The rock bearing its carving is first mentioned in print in an 1873 edition of the Gazetteer of Massachusetts, and it was described in this way. Quote, "There upon its face a rude figure supposed to have cut by some Indian artist." That's all it says. Then, in 1883, the carving is described in a town history as, quote, "A broad ledge which crops out near the house of William Ketteridge has upon its surface grooves made by glaciers. Rude outlines of the human face have been traced upon it, and the figure is said to be the work of Indians." So even that quote kind of makes it sound like there are some, rough lines here, and there's been a figure traced over it. But they both agree this is the work of Indians, Native Americans, they mean, of course, but back in this day, they were still calling them Indians. So, why did it change from Indians, Native Americans, to knights? Well, that's partly thanks to William Goodwin. And if that name sounds familiar to you, that's because you are an amazing long-time listener and you have a great memory. So thank you and congrats. We talked about William Goodwin when I did an episode about America's Stonehenge. Goodwin is the man who originally owned America's Stonehenge, although he called it simply Mystery Hill. To support his claims that far Western Europeans had been coming to America and leaving behind mysteries in stone, many of which happened to be on his property and which he would be happy to show you for a fee. He said this was happening for centuries before Columbus ever arrived. To be fair, even Goodwin didn't claim to see a full-formed knight. He only said that he saw the sword. But instead of giving Native Americans the credit, he insisted that only a Norseman would have carved such a weapon. So he was saying that, yes, look, a Norseman carved this sword into this stone, and that's further proof that these Vikings were here, that these people knew about, these Western Europeans knew about the United States before it was the United States, and they're the true discoverers, and they left, these druids probably built some Stonehenge stuff here in New Hampshire too, and you can come see it if you pay me a little bit of money. So he was kind of using it to back up his own claims, even though he wasn't even admitting that it was from the same... I don't know, it's kind of convoluted, but white people. They wanted to say white people founded the United States, basically. From there, Frank Glenn, president of the Archaeological Society of Connecticut, moved the stone from its original location and used chalk to draw in a full figure of the knight and everything you're supposed to be seeing in 1954. This time, it resembled the medieval knight with a sword and shield, and he is usually said to be the, quote, discoverer of the Westford Knight. Now, the other clue that I mentioned earlier is a small rock with a carving of a boat, an arrow pointing down, and the number 184. Believers in the Sinclair theory believe that this may have at one point pointed to the treasure of the Knights Templar buried in the United States. Why do they believe this? Who the fuck knows? But I will say it is at least somewhat more impressive than the actual knight, because unlike the actual knight, you can clearly see that there is a boat, an arrow, and a number written on this rock. There's lots of other little problems with this theory too, including the fact that the Knights Templar were disbanded not just like within the Earl's lifetime, but like 90 years before his lifetime, so things don't always really add up. Some people seem to have a real hard-on to prove that the UK somehow discovered America. You might even say that they are rock hard to do so. Okay, that was a slightly dirty dad joke for you there. I also just took a little break. I am really sorry, you guys. My voice is more shot than I thought it was, and I can't get through much more than a paragraph. So I'm sorry if I was kind of flying through that information there. I was trying to get to the end of it for you, and I guess that's really not the best way to do a show, so I apologize. I'm going to try to take it slower as we cover our next story. But I think I am going to cap it off at 2. I thought I was going to do 3. We're going to cap it off at 2. It might make the episode a little bit short. And if that's the case, I do apologize, but I know you'll all understand. So, let's go on and talk about the scariest road in all of Billerica, Dudley Road. In Billerica, Massachusetts, there is a heavily forested road known for many strange tales. It starts with picturesque farms, but soon thereafter the road narrows and the trees seem to close in around you. A few intrepid souls have chosen to walk the length of Dudley Road at night. They and other travelers have reported hearing cries of anguish and tortured screams coming from deep within the woods off the road. Others say if you park in just the right spot and wait long enough, you will see what appears to be a phantom nun cross right in front of you. Others would advise you never to stop your car. If you do, they warn, your vehicle may just be overrun by short, screaming bald men who will try to get in. So, why should this semi-rural road in Billerica attract so much alleged paranormal activity? Well, there are a couple theories. The first is that there is an old abandoned insane asylum hidden somewhere in the woods just off Dudley Road. Although it has been closed for many decades now, some say that the atrocities that took place inside there have left an indelible mark on the area and cursed it to be a place of misery for at least the foreseeable future. The most interesting story, however, involves that phantom nun that I spoke of earlier. She was said to be not only a nun, but also a witch. Well, that's according to one version of the story. Once upon a time, there was a convent on Dudley Road. A witch, and I do mean a witch in the classic made a deal to serve Satan kind, not the harmless horticulturist. This witch was clever enough to disguise herself as a nun in order to tear apart God's kingdom from within. Her deceit was soon discovered, however, and unidentified good guys hanged her from a tree just outside the convent. With her final breath, she cursed the town, leading to the strangeness in the area to this day. But that's just one version of the story. Here's another. There was a convent on Dudley Road, and a witch had come to live there, but she was not alone. This version presents a secret satanic witch cult known for luring innocent young virgins into the woods and forcing them to take place in strange occult rituals that often ended in human sacrifice. Once their intended victim was able to escape, and report the witches to the town council, who promptly hanged the entire lot of witches. That's another version, but maybe you're more into the Me Too movement stories. You might find this version more interesting. There were no witches hiding in the convent, but there was a lustful priest who is known to have had his way with a number of the nuns and aspiring nuns. Eventually, one of them became pregnant. Panicked, the priest decided that he must get rid of the nun before she started showing. That's when he remembered the old trick of accusing a woman of witchcraft. He accuses her, finds her guilty, and executes her right on the spot. I personally like the witch cult version the best, but no matter what your preference, there are problems with the story. There is not now, nor has there ever been, a convent on Dudley Road. There is an older-looking white building that many paranormal investigators will point to and say, "That's the place right there." But that building is only about 100 years old, and there are no records of witchcraft trials taking place in Billerica even close to 1919. As for the insane asylum, I'm afraid this too seems to be a complete fantasy. There were some institutions in Billerica known to house insane inmates, but none of those were on Dudley Road, and none of them were set deep in the woods or anywhere nearby. It's just another formerly rural road quickly being urbanized like the rest of eastern Massachusetts. It's getting so crowded out here that even our ghosts are forced to consider moving out of state. Now, as I was preparing notes for this episode, I got to thinking, Billerica isn't really too far away. I used to spend a lot of time out there. I used to date a girl from Billerica. And I said, you know what? Fuck it. Let me just drive out there. I posted about it on Facebook, and then I went out and I did the thing. So what I'm going to do for you now, I recorded it, and I did a little commentary. And, of course, it's me doing the commentary, so it's not like a traditional paranormal investigation. I'm going to play a snippet of that for you now. I'm going to post the whole thing on the Spookaroos, and only on the Spookaroos for now. So if you want to see, I actually went up and down the road twice. So if you want to see the full video and you want to see what the road looks like for yourself through kind of shaky camera work that I'm trying to hold and drive at the same time, don't worry, it's not a busy road. I was in no danger. No real danger. You can check that out on Facebook when you search for the group Spookaroos. I'll post it there. On the clip that I'm about to play for you, I mentioned at one point that I hear a strange noise, and I wasn't sure if my phone would pick up the noise. And listening back, I can hear that it actually was picking it up. So, as you listen for me to say something like, this might not be an exact quote, but something like, I think we passed the scary part, and right around there, you'll hear, if you listen very close, the strange noise that I was talking about. It kind of sounds, dare I say, like a ghostly whispering of the wind, perhaps. It wasn't a particularly windy night, but I think it was actually more a noise coming from my car, which I kind of explained in the video. But listen for it, so you'll know what I'm talking about, and you can hear it a few times if you listen really hard. So, with that said, please enjoy my little solo mish to Billerica's haunted Dudley Road. All right, here we are on the infamous Dudley Road in Billerica. As you can see, not too many streetlights, kind of a dark road, but really just a regular Massachusetts country road. I don't want to go too slow. I know the neighbors on this street are kind of sick of people coming through here. You get a lot of yahoos coming around with all their woo-woo and nonsense. And as you know, I'm not that type. I'm going to put my window up. I don't really believe in, all this stuff. So I'm just kind of coming through to show you. We are in Billerica, Massachusetts. Billerica is a town that I have some history with. Have having dated and lived with a woman from Billerica, so I used to come out here all the time to see her family, spend the holidays and that kind of thing. And I do remember, actually, when I dated that woman, we did come out here one night because this was her hometown haunt, you know? So she knew I was into creepy stuff. Actually, we had gone with a friend, a third date, you might say. A third wheel on a date. And we had gone to see Donnie Darko. I think they had re-released that or something. And we had gone to see that. And then afterwards, bumpy road. How's this camera work? Sorry about that. Okay, so we had gone to see Donnie Darko, and then afterwards she wanted to show us her hometown haunt, which was this road. But as you can see, I wouldn't even consider this a particularly... I mean, I've seen spookier forested roads. You know how I feel about forested roads. I call them Bigfoot roads. I've talked about that before on the show. I've shared pictures of some pretty spooky ones. So far... Well, maybe I spoke too soon. This is looking a little creepier down here. I like these trees. Yeah? Yeah, this is more like it. Oh, but see, then there's a street light up here. Just maybe we're getting somewhere. But still, nonetheless, I can see where you could be afraid of maybe a Yeti or a Wolfman jumping out at you, or maybe a ghostly nun, as they say. Nothing yet. Alright, now this is the narrow bridge. I might have to put the phone down if some other car comes by or something. 3-ton weight limit. Well, I've lost weight recently. I think we should be okay. Let's see. The road gets very narrow here. I'm going to turn. I guess my high beams are okay. Alright. Yeah, it's spookier down here, but still. So far, I remember the first time we came down here with that woman and the third wheel. I was not particularly impressed, and that remains my impression now. Now, you see those reflectors over there on that pole or tree? They kind of look like glowing red eyes for a second. But, just reflectors. Mothman. Alright. Big, beautiful homes out this way. Definitely not too scary, except how other people are living when I'm living in my little 2-room apartment. That's a little scary. But other than that, I'm not seeing anything paranormal. I really was hoping to meet that cult of satanic witches. Again, depends on which version of the story you believe, but kind of a Suspiria thing going on out here, according to some versions of the legend. Did I say virgins or versions? I'm not sure. What are these fancy ass lights? Billerica's stepping up. I think we passed this, what's supposed to be the scary part. I think that little section I pointed out was it. I didn't really see the house that people talk about, which is supposed to be right before the bridge. Did we cross? We must have crossed the bridge already. Oh, I'm speeding. Alright, I will say, I did just hear some weird noises. It kind of sounded like my tires. But it was weird, I will say that. Not scary. Hold on. I'm putting down my window again. I'm trying to identify where it's coming from. This is the farm where people usually start, by the way. So we must be getting near the other end of the road. Alright, I don't know what the noise was, but there was kind of a strange noise. But on the other hand, I don't usually drive around in a silent car, so maybe that's just a regular noise in my car. I usually listen to a podcast or some oldies or something. So, maybe that's just a regular noise. Anyway, it didn't sound like people screaming or witches laughing or anything like that. It was just kind of a strange noise. And hello, fellow traveler. All right, this is the end of Dudley Road, I believe. I don't think it goes on further. If it does, I'll keep going. Let's see. Nope. You gotta turn one way or the other, partner. So there it was, my little solo adventure to Dudley Road. Sorry it wasn't more exciting, but no ghosts jump out at me. We did get a slightly spooky noise that I think, looking back on it, was probably just a noise coming from my tires. Perhaps an issue with the brakes, small little issue. It's a new car, shouldn't be anything major. But sometimes they do lead to some kind of strange noises as you drive. So, Dudley Road, not super impressive, if you ask me. However, I think it has been built up quite a bit. I bet back in the day it was scarier. I bet if you saw that road 20 years ago, some of those McMansions weren't there, and it wasn't as terrifying. Like I said in the video, the scariest thing to me is just, class and wage discrepancies here in the United States. I'm just a poor, humble man working for a living, breaking my back every day, working with the folks I work with, doing the Lord's work, you might say, helping people with disabilities, and I can afford a 2-room, not 2-bedroom, 2-room apartment, and these people, who knows what they're up to, but they are living in these clearly multi-million-dollar mansions on haunted roads. Now, who should be living in a multi-million-dollar mansion on a haunted road? It should be someone like me. Come on, I would build like a mystery mansion full of surprises. It would be open to visitors. It would have a dark ride in it. It would be awesome. Let's make it happen. Teamwork makes the dream work. I should start a GoFundMe page for this, don't you think? A real haunted mansion. I think we should do it, folks. I'll be back with more Legends of Massachusetts and lots of other spooky topics besides. Once again, please visit the website spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. My voice is running out as we speak, which is really bad news since I've got about 2 hours till curtain for Avenue Q, but I'm going to fight through it. Just you wait. Okay, so yes, check out the websites. Please, you can tell I'm fighting through my illness to bring this episode to you. Hopefully that is worth a kind iTunes review or Apple Podcast review or Stitcher review or YouTube comment or however you happen to be listening. Please go ahead and write some kind words. If you have a local legend that you want me to check out, please pass it along. You can write to me through the Facebook page or Instagram, or you can hit me up at spookyasshit@gmail.com. I will get those messages as well. Please tell me all about your hometown haunt, and if I live close enough, perhaps I'll even visit there myself. You never know. Until next time, don't be afraid.